In 2009, the 6th Children's Laureate was appointed, Anthony Browne, and he, as Michael mentioned, followed Quentin Blake by being the 2nd illustrator to be appointed Children's Laureate. He is also the creator of the Congress illustration, which you see at the side, and I'll be telling more about your opportunity to buy a card featuring that illustration later. Anthony, after graduating with a degree in graphic arts, worked in medical illustration and illustrated greeting cards before he became a children's illustrator. His first book, Through the Magic Mirror, was published in 1976, and a number of other successful books followed. Gorilla, published in 1983, won acclaim in the UK and abroad, winning many awards, including the UK Kate Greenaway Medal, which he went on to win again in 1992 with a book called Zoo, one of the very few illustrators to win the award twice. He has also created one of the best-loved characters, the chimp Willy, who has appeared in a number of books, including Willy the Chimp and Willy the Wizard. In 2000, he received the Hans Christian Andersen Award, the first British illustrator to do so. Can you please welcome Anthony Browne?
I was going to start by playing the shape game, which is basically what I did when I was Children's Laureate. I banged on and on and on about a game that my brother and I thought we'd invented when I was about 5 and he was about 7, a drawing game, which has become very important to me. And I played it with many children and many adults throughout the 2 years. It's a very simple game. You're very lucky that we haven't got a flip chart, by the way, because this would normally involve audience participation. And I know how adults love to come and draw on a stage in front of people. Children, however, are fantastic at it. And anybody who doesn't know this game, but who has anything to do with children, I strongly suggest you play it. It's a game that makes artists of us all. Well, in fact, as we probably should know, all children are artists. All children are creative. The game involves just one person drawing an abstract shape on a piece of paper, then the other person looking at it, trying to imagine, does that look like something? Does it remind me of something? Am I able to transform this into something? And then they do it, preferably using a different coloured pen. And as I said, children are absolutely fantastic at this game because they actually know what drawing is about. Drawing, in my opinion at least, isn't about looking at a glass of water and making a picture of it so that it looks like a photograph. Drawing is about telling us something, and instinctively, children know that. So they would have, if this was a room full of children, they would have marched up to the stage confidently and transformed any shape I drew them. It's just incredible to see. But also, I've found out that at family events, when children and parents come along together, I can sometimes persuade an adult to come up and draw, and they find something that they didn't expect to find. They find that they actually are artists themselves. It's all in us. And one of the things I tell children whenever I go into school is artists and writers and filmmakers and footballers and poets and scientists aren't any different to them. We're all the same. At 5 and 6, all children are creative. All children can draw and make up stories. Can we go to the first drawing that I made when I was 5 or 6, I think? A drawing of a pair of legs walking along. We'll get there eventually. I'll describe it. A pair of legs. Here we are. Tony Browne, age 6. The only drawing that exists from my childhood. And I show this to children and show them that when I was 6, I didn't draw any better than anybody else. All children of 6 can draw. They can all make up stories. They can all create. And I think in a funny kind of way, I was playing the shape game here without realizing it. I'd drawn a pair of legs walking along, probably mine, and I'd drawn a little line for the ground, and I must have thought, that's a bit of a boring drawing. Is there anything I can do to make it more interesting? And so I drew a little pirate's head in my shoe. And suddenly that transformed this rather boring drawing. It is like the shape game. The legs are like the shape, and the pirate of me transforming it into something. It's like the beginning of a story. One day I was walking along and I noticed there was a pirate in my shoe. And then I must have thought that my legs looked a bit like the masts of a ship. And I knew that pirates climbed the masts. I was obviously going through a pirate period at this stage. So I've done two little legs crawling up my trousers. Now, when I'm talking to adults, I always have to say, at this stage, that nothing like this ever happened to me. It was just my imagination. I don't need to say that to children. Children, of course, know how the imagination works. It works for them the same way it worked for me. And I've turned it into the beginning of a story. What's in my shoe and who's in my sock? So it's this idea of transformation. And I always think of stories. When we invent a story, I don't actually write stories. Stories sort of come into my head in a funny kind of mixture of pictures and words. It's a bit like remembering a dream or imagining the making of a film. So the first thing that comes into my head are pictures and words together. But I think all stories come from somewhere else. I think all drawings come from something else. It's been suggested that there are only 7 stories in the whole world. I don't know if that's true or not. But let's imagine it is. If it is, then every story we write is a variation on one or other of these stories, or sometimes we join 2 stories together. So again, I'm always saying to children, when they ask me, where do you get your ideas from? I always say, well, the same place as you. It's from things that happened to me when I was a child, or things that happened to my children, or stories that people have told me, or things that other people have written. As Michael said, we all steal. We steal from, or borrow, I'd like to say. I like to think, from other people's stories, from films, from paintings, from dreams, from newspaper articles, from everywhere. Ideas come from everywhere. And some of my stories have come from things that happened to me as a child, but I don't tell them exactly as they happened. Of course not. I play the shape game. I transform them. This is a sculpture. This is the kind of talk I would always give to children when I was the Laureate. And indeed, I'd give the same talk to adults too. I don't really see a huge difference between us. This is a sculpture by Picasso, and I say, what do you think it's a sculpture of? And somebody will guess a lion or a monkey or a gorilla or a chimpanzee, and eventually somebody will say a baboon. Yes, it's a baboon. And I'll say, can you notice anything unusual about this baboon? And the first child will usually put his hand up and say, yes, it's got a funny bottom. And I say, yeah, I suppose so. If baboons have, but it's not funny bottom to a baboon. And I say, maybe look a bit closer, and somebody will always get this eventually, or sometimes quite quickly, and say, yeah, the head looks like a car. And yes, the head looks like a car because it is a car. And I believe that when Picasso made this sculpture, he had young children. And one day, I imagine, he must have seen this toy yellow car, and his kids were playing with it, and thought, hang on a minute, that looks just like a baboon's head. So he built this whole wonderful, rather beautiful bronze sculpture around this very simple idea, one thing looking like another. He's transforming one into another. He's playing the shape game. He's creating something, not something from nothing, but something from something. This is a photograph of a corn bin in the Sudan that the painter Max Ernst saw. And it reminded him of something. He wanted to play the shape game. He didn't call it the shape game. I should say that my brother and I thought we'd invented the shape game, but it turns out that children all over the world play this game. They've all invented it for themselves, or it's been passed down from parents or brothers and sisters or friends. It's a universal game. Max Ernst saw this photograph, and I asked children, if you were looking at this photograph, what would you change it into? And they'll say, an egg in an egg cup, or a bomb, or well, my favourite was somebody who said it looked like a fat man's pair of trousers, which I thought would be a fantastic thing to turn it into. But Max Ernst turned it into an elephant, or at least the kind of elephant that Max Ernst painted. Of course, with Max Ernst, he's never going to paint a photograph of a photographic, naturalistic painting of an elephant. He transforms it. He plays the shape game with it. Years later, many years later, I came to do a book using my character, Willie. I thought that he would probably love to draw. He's probably still got a creative streak in him. And I thought he might look at famous paintings and transform them, play the shape game with them. I imagine he might look at this painting and see not an elephant or indeed a corn bin, but some kind of mysterious robotic vacuum cleaner that he could order around and say, come and clean this bit of muck off the carpet here. And then we'll talk about how artists and writers either put ourselves into our paintings or into our stories, or as Alan Bennett once said, we don't put ourselves into our stories, but we find ourselves in our stories. And I thought that's quite interesting. So painters put themselves in their story, in their paintings, or indeed in their stories, one way or the other. So Willie always puts himself, but he always puts a character or something that's got something to do with his life. So he's not just playing the shape game. He's not just looking at a shape and transforming it. Another story happens. He's creating stories by painting these pictures. So the top of the strange robot vacuum cleaner, which here was some geometric abstract designs, it's become a character that Willie fears, a character called Buster Nose, who is a kind of bully figure that Willie's anxious about. So he often puts him in his paintings. He puts him in his paintings in a way where he can control them. So in one painting, Buster Nose has become his pet dog that he takes for a walk down the street. So here he is, he's looking at a famous painting. He knows that every picture tells a story. He's looking at one of the most beautiful paintings in the world, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, and turning it into something which may or may not be one of the most beautiful paintings in the world. See what you think? Obviously not. But again, he's putting himself into it, he's putting his friends, he's transforming it, he's seeing one thing and turning it into another. He's not just copying, he's borrowing and using it. And as I say, this is what all creative people do all the time. Nothing comes from nothing. It turns out that Leonardo da Vinci played the shape game. He talked about looking at an old wall that was damp and the plaster was broken and cracked and bits had fallen off. And he said, if you look at that old wall for long enough, you'll see the whole world. You'll see monsters and battles and landscapes. So I thought that when Willie came to transform the Mona Lisa, obviously he'd put himself in there somewhere. But he could look at the landscape behind. He'd see paths going through mountains. He'd see rivers. He'd see bridges. He'd see all kinds of stuff. And he might look at it the way that Leonardo looked at the old wall. And I don't know if this is one of those clever ones with a... I'm a bit risky to press this yellow button. Is this a... It's nothing. I was hoping I might be able to point. It doesn't matter. But if you look at that picture for long enough, you'll see dogs, you'll see feet, you'll see humans, you'll see gorillas, you'll see hedgehogs, you'll see croissants. The whole world is there. This, one of the other things I wanted to talk about is the Laureate. As Michael was talking about children's literature being sidelined, as he put it, I had a feeling, I still have, that picture books are being marginalised, certainly in this country. I think children being encouraged to move away from picture books earlier and earlier and move away from pictures into words. And it's kind of part of growing up. We leave the visual stuff behind. It's kind of superficial. Pictures. Let's go into really serious stuff, proper stuff, academic stuff, stuff that will help you to pass exams. And I understand this. I understand why parents and teachers want their children to do well at school, of course. But I don't think it actually helps to drag people away from picture books too soon. And I do hear in bookshops at parents telling their really quite young children, oh, come away, you don't want a book like that, you want a proper book. And by that, they mean a book without pictures. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why certainly boys' reading has had such problems in recent years, because I think they're being forced into something, sometimes that they're not quite ready for. And sometimes they're prevented from going back and looking at picture books, or encouraged not to. That's kind of baby stuff, that's kids stuff. Well, this was from my version of Hansel and Gretel, and I think it was the 5th book I ever made. And leading up to this, I'd done 4 books before, and in most of them, there were funny little things in the background, strange little details going on. And it all started, I think this is the right order. Yes, this is actually the 2nd book I ever made, a book called A Walk in the Park. And it was a story developed from something I tried to do when I was at art college. When I was at art college, I had no idea I could ever do children's books. Not the slightest idea. Although I like making up stories and I like painting pictures. I never thought of putting the two things together. I never saw a picture book when I was a boy. Anyway, I developed this story about two groups of people. A father, his daughter and dog go to the park. A mother, her son and dog go to the park. The dogs play together in the park. The adults have nothing to do with each other. Gradually the children start to play with each other, and then they go home. And I thought, this is such an incredibly boring, simple story. I need to make it more interesting. I thought it's just going to be pictures of dogs running around the park and people standing or sitting watching them. So I started putting these strange little surrealistic, as they've been described, details in the background. So there's a man taking a pig for a walk, Father Christmas is kicking a football, Tarzan swinging through the trees, and there's a face on the tree. But it didn't mean anything. It was just really to bolster my confidence, to get me through the book, because I felt I've got to, in some way, make the story more interesting. I look back now and I see I actually was making the story more interesting in the sense where the dogs were chasing each other. I've drawn them behind the tree, and almost like an optical illusion, so it looks as though the dog is half a pedigree dog and half a mongrel dog. And so I was starting to use the idea of class being an issue in this story. The adults didn't have anything to do with each other because one was of a very different class to the other. Anyway, I was asked to go on a very good series of television programs. This was the second book I'd ever made. I'd never talked about my work. I was asked to go onto television, and I was interviewed by the great Aidan Chambers, who was mentioned early on. And Aidan asked me about the fun little details in the background. And I lied. I lied on television. I said, well, it's to do with the way the children are looking at the world. I said, children are seeing things for the first time, so everything's new and fresh to them. And I was doing something a bit like the surrealists tried to do by putting two ordinary objects together in an unusual situation in a way to give us a fresh look at objects we take for granted. And I burbled on about this for a bit, feeling terribly guilty, and I think Aidan was quite impressed, I don't know. But for years I felt, gosh, I felt so guilty that I'd made this up, pretended to be something that I wasn't. And 20 years later, went back to this story and did it again as a book called Voices in the Park. I revisited the story. I played the shape game with the original story. I told it from 4 different points of view. And I'd started to realize, in actual fact, I hadn't been lying on television. Because when I look back to the first drawing I showed you of the legs and the pirate in the shoe was exactly the same as the man taking a pig for a walk, Tarzan swinging through the trees in a British park. I was creating something. I was letting my childish imagination free. And that's what I was doing in this story. So in a way, I was looking through the world through the eyes of the children. But I hadn't realized it. Over the years, I've come to be more self-conscious, as indeed Aidan told me I would. In fact, he once heard me speak, and I sort of said, the trouble with talking about my work is I get too self-conscious about it. And he said that self-consciousness is actually a good thing. And I think he probably was right. Anyway, I told the story 4 times. From the point of view of the woman who's now become a gorilla. That's another story. Why and how they became a gorilla. When in the original story they were animals. If there's time, or if anybody wants to ask me a question afterwards, I can tell you. And I tried to make all the stories. They were all telling the same story, but I wanted to show to the child reader how the same experience can seem very different from somebody else's point of view. So she's this kind of well-off, middle-class woman going to the park. She's got a different typeface to everybody else. I thought this was the kind of typeface of the newspaper she might read. I've given her the autumn. Everybody had a different time of the year. She's got the autumn with the rich colours of autumn. She goes to the park. She lets her dog off a lead. She's a bit annoyed because this rough dog comes and bothers her own dog, but she tells it off. And then she sits on the bench and just plans what she's going to cook for dinner that night. Then she notices her child is gone, and she finds him talking to this rather rough-looking girl. So she tells him off. She talks to him as she might talk to the dog. She says, Charles, come here, sit. And she speaks to the dog and says, oh, come along, Victoria. It's time for home. So as they go home, this is the end of her day. The sun's going down. They're leaving a trail of leaves. Now, when I do the preliminary drawing for a picture like this, it's pretty rough. I don't like to put too much detail in. So I'd roughly draw the woman and the dog, and I knew that I was going to sort of hide the sun. We could hardly see him. He's just edging out from underneath her body, or from behind her body. And I knew there was going to be a park with stuff in the park and some park gates. So I roughly drew it. Then when I came to paint the picture, I always try to leave things to develop, things that will happen maybe or will occur to me as I'm painting the picture. So I'd left the trail of autumn leaves. That seemed appropriate. And then I ended up, they all left a trail as they left the park. And I was painting the sun setting, going down. So autumn colours, reds and yellows and oranges. Leaves, I thought, leaves fall in the autumn, of course. And then as I was painting, see if the tree in the background there has burst into flame. And I can't really remember back to the moment it happened. But I can only assume that I must have wondered, why have I done that? It's not funny. It's not clever. And I think what happens is that as I'm painting the character, she's angry. She's angry. She's going home. She's angry with her son for talking to this rough-looking child. She's angry for her son for wandering off and playing on the swings with the child. So I think as I'm painting this picture, I'm kind of in her mood, in her anger. And we talk about burning with anger. We feel very hot when we get angry. So I think that's what happened. That's what happens with this picture. Back to Hansel and Gretel. This was the first time I'd illustrated a book that I hadn't written. So I think in this case, I was trying to make it new. I was trying to find a different way to illustrate the book. The story had been told and illustrated 100 times before. So I found myself doing it in modern dress, or at least in the kind of late 1950s clothes that I grew up with. But I also discovered something that became very important for me. Something about the details in the background. They didn't just have to be Father Christmas kicking a football in a park, or a woman pushing a pram with a dog in it instead of a baby. I could actually use the details, because there's no humour in this story. But I found I could use the details in the picture to help tell parts of the story that the words don't tell. So here, Hansel and Gretel's mother waking them up early in the morning to take them out into the forest. Hansel and Gretel have heard her planning with her husband what they're going to do. So I'm trying to show at this point of the story how they're feeling about their mother. And she must have seemed pretty bad to them, pretty evil to be taking them out into the forest to leave them. So I had the idea of making a connection to the witch. So I obviously painted her in black clothes, which witches are generally painted in. And I painted a shadow on the wall behind her, which taken together with the gap in the curtains, where it's showing it's dark outside, is the triangular shape of a witch's hat on top of her body. And I used that black triangle again in the picture. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's a mouse hole in the shape of a black triangle. There's a dark triangular shadow on top of the chest of drawers. The steeple of the church in the painting is a black triangle. There's something on top of the wardrobe which looks as though it might be a black triangle. And a pair of red shoes here, which could also relate to witches. So I discovered something that was going to be very important to me. One, that I could use the details in the background to help to tell parts of the story that the words don't tell. It could show us how people were feeling, what they were thinking about, maybe what's going to happen next. Some aspect of them could come out in the background, in the colours I use, in the way I place things in a picture. But I could also use the shape game to tell the story. So that's what I'm doing with the gap in the curtains. The gap in the curtains could have just been a tall rectangular gap where the curtains had come apart. I could have had the curtains completely closed. But I chose to do that because I knew I could use the gap in the curtains, transforming that gap into the shape of a witch's hat. So just to move quickly through voices in the park. The second voice, the man. Again, the man who's become a gorilla. Or has he? We look at his arms, we'll see they're not gorilla's arms. A typeface for the newspaper I thought he might read. We don't actually see where he lives. His season is the winter. The trees are bare. They're bending over like the lamppost, like his back. He's walking along the street. It's cold. It's dark. It's miserable. He's out of work. He's passing Father Christmas, who's begging on the street. It says he has a wife and millions of kids to support. Two paintings noted for their humour, the Laughing Cavalier and the Smiling Mona Lisa, have both cried a pool of tears which has leaked onto the pavement. It's a very dull, depressing picture. And I painted this in a very dull, depressing February. And when I finished this picture, I abandoned the book. I went into my local Waterstones and thought, I'm not going to see this here. I'm visiting an old book 20 years ago. Have I run out of ideas? Am I doing the wrong thing at the wrong time? So I abandoned children's books altogether and painted some pictures. And then came back into children's books. Through those, actually. The next book was a series of pictures, a series of paintings, and that was a book called Willie the Dreamer, which is the most enjoyable book I've ever worked on, because it was the freest. I could paint whatever I wanted. There was no story. I could just create each picture as a story. Anyway, I was persuaded, thankfully I was persuaded to come back to this book by my publishers. And so this is the man. He looks on a bench, he looks through the paper for a job, he doesn't see anything. Then he notices his daughter's gone, then they go home. And the text just says, Smudge, that's the name of his daughter. Smudge cheered me up, she chatted to me happily all the way through. So we've got it's a bit like spot the difference pictures. Do you remember spot the difference pictures in comics where you have two pictures which look alike, look the same, but if you look closely, you can see tiny details? I do that a lot in my books. So this is like a spot the difference. She's transformed the scene. The light isn't coming from the street lamp, or the street lamp she's turned into a spring flower, suggestion of the spring coming. She's broken through the pavement. It's actually coming from her, this warm golden light. It's her that's filling him with her warmth and love and affection and brightness and cheerfulness and creativity. And Father Christmas and Mona Lisa and the Laughing Cavalier are dancing, the Christmas tree lights on the tree. King Kong's appeared on top of the flats there. I don't know why he's there. He keeps coming back. And the third voice, the little boy's voice, he's trapped at home, he's trapped in his life, he's trapped in the room. I tried to use a different style, different drawing style, with this very close cross-hatching ink lines sort of trapping him. The typeface is kind of constipated. It's kind of tight and worried. They go to the park and things look a bit better. He sees the dogs running around. He sees people having fun. He says, "Look, everybody seems to be having a great time, but I wished I was." He's still standing in the shadow of his mother, literally. We can see her shape of her hat. I played the shape game with the trees, turned into the shape of her hat. The clouds in the sky, the shape of her hat. Top of the lamppost, wherever he looks, he sees his mum. She's overprotecting him. He goes on. Eventually, a girl asks him to go on the slide, and he goes on the slide. She goes down incredibly fast, and he's worried. I don't think he's ever been on a slide before. I don't think his mother has ever allowed him to. He's at the top of the slide, not knowing quite what to do. We can see the reflection of his face upside down in the slide, and he's screaming. He's terrified inside. And there's a little model aeroplane which has crashed to the ground there. So the fourth voice, the little girl, it's bright, it's summer. The handwritten lettering, at least it's meant to be bright colours. The park is like a wonderland. It's funny, it's rude, it's vulgar. The little boy gives her a flower, which she takes home. When she gets home, she puts it in a cup, which sort of gives a little story of the day. In the flower, which in the original version, in Walk in the Park, was just a nondescript yellow flower, is now a poppy, and the poppy has symbols of remembrance. So this is perhaps suggesting something about remembering. Maybe the two children will remember this day. That, I think, is... I haven't actually overrun, but I know we're a bit pushed for time. Those are the things I did when I was the Laureate. I've still carried on doing that. I think we all carry on in our way, being the Laureate one way or the other. I had a fantastic time. It's a great honour to be the Laureate, and a great thing that Michael and Ted Hughes invented. So I'd recommend, actually, if anybody from any country here would like to create their own children's Laureate, I think it's a fantastic thing to do. Thank you all very much. Thank you.